Hey, good morning, afternoon, or evening, good people, wherever you are, wherever you happen to be, and however we're together. Thanks for being here. I'm Dave, and this is Dave's Head. So, what's in my head? Vince Lombardi is considered to be in the upper echelon of professional football coaches. He's most notably known for coaching the Green Bay Packers. A couple fun facts. He won 75% of his games with the Packers. He won 3 championships, 2 Super Bowls. Some people call that 5 NFL championships. We won't go there. But notably, it's not 4 NFL championships because in 1960 he lost his first appearance to the Philadelphia Eagles. Go Birds, even in 1960. But as much as I would like for this to be about winning, that's not what's in my head. He's also infamous for being captured during one of his games yelling, "What the hell is going on out here?" I can't do it like him, not even going to try and impersonate him. But that's exactly where we are with this administration, not winning. If you think we're winning, you're more than welcome to, like, assholes. Everyone has one. You can have your opinion as well. In fact, we're so horrifyingly comical that even talks of Canada being the 51st state and starting tariff wars with allies and talking about a takeover of Greenland for strategic purposes, they're not the most asininely idiotic thing this administration is doing or has done anymore. And just a reminder, we're barely 2 months in. Like, that's the weird part about all this. We're only 2 months in, folks. If you can do quick math, a term is 48 months 12, 24, 36, 48, 4 years. We're barely 2 months in. I want you to do something. Just Google the words war secrets, and you'll get a litany of articles. The Atlantic Magazine's Jeffrey Goldberg was added to a Signal platform. Signal's like a private messaging platform. In case you don't know, Google it. A Signal platform messaging group, which apparently included, check this out, Vice President J.D. Vance, Defense Secretary, we're going to put that in quotes, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, in addition to National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. In this private group, they discuss details of an impending attack, right? An impending military attack with a reporter who was added to a private, secure, encrypted, government high level cabinet chat. And now, spin cycles, listen, the machine is just bouncing all over the place trying to spin this stuff, right? As if intelligent people don't exist, but we all know Trump likes the poorly educated, so this goes right along with how they're trying to spin this as not a major security issue. What I urge people to do is change the words from Trump administration, cabinet members leak, war or attack level details to a reporter in a private messaging chat, to replace the words Trump with Obama or Biden or even Bush Jr., not Senior. And I promise you, I'd bet every single penny I have that your reaction would not be, no biggie here. Just a mistake. They won't even admit it's a mistake, by the way. Literally, the DefSec railed out, I don't know if he was sober or not. Apparently has problems, whatever. Instead of owning up to it, decided to spin it, because that's what's going on right now, spin it into an attack and try to discredit this reporter and a impromptu presser after he was getting off a plane heading to some vehicles. In testimony to Congress, multiple people from the cabinet won't even admit that it's a mistake. The Republican leader of the House, I've never seen something dismissed so offhandedly in my life. And again, I urge you to be open-minded and honest, actually honest with yourself, and replace the name Trump with Obama or Biden or even Bush Jr. The proverbial shit would be hitting the proverbial fan. But mediocrity, deception, flat out lying, whatever you want to put it, minimizing really big things, mistakes, has become the measuring line, the Mendoza line, the barely minimum accepted norm for this leader of the free world, quote, leader of the free world and his administration. This is not the first time this has happened. It's happened hundreds of times. Go look at history. Go look at first term. Go look at prior to that in New York. Go look at prior to that in Florida. Go look at all the different ways that he's had lawyers walk into a courtroom to settle things. And, you know, of course, back in the day, settling was an admission of guilt until he did it. But that's okay. Go back and look at the celebration of mediocrity and the people who leech onto that. Because if enough people say it, there are people out there in this world, especially in this country, who will simply believe it. Not because it's true, but because they're fans of a person. But make no mistake about it. Which should have been secret, maybe even classified, likely classified, information was idiotically leaked to a member of the press in a private chat that they were invited to. But unfortunately, it's par for the course. These things happen when you actually hire people based on their race, based on their sex. Or is that DEI? Interesting concept. When you hire people because they're fans of yours, because they're talking heads on a news, quote unquote, news network. When they kiss your ass on both cheeks. Not because they're actually qualified. Sounds a lot like DEI, doesn't it? Or at least the perception of it, not the real thing. We've actually talked about what real DEI is the last 2 episodes. We know that's not what it actually is, but it's a perception of what it is, fully on display. And the supposed downsides of that, fully on display. But nevertheless, like most things, there will be a subset of people who downplay this, and this will fade off into the sunset until the next idiotic thing happens from a collective of unqualified people who sit and occupy the highest areas of our government. And yes, we're only 2 months in. But her emails, remember the massive outrage when it was discovered almost 2 years ago to the date, by the way, or not 2 years, I think it was 10 years ago to the date, that Hillary hosted emails on a private server. Also remember that she testified for 10 hours. She actually sat there in front of Congress, testified for 10 hours. I imagine that won't happen here in this situation. I imagine you won't get a 10-hour testimony from someone to actually own up and explain. But the interesting thing is this DefSec, who was confirmed by Republicans, right? Because they wanted to push through Trump's stuff. He did serve in the Army National Guard. And so there are some level of qualifications there. Let's be honest, not the qualifications. Some level, basically served in the Army National Guard. Many other candidates, much better. But his primary, most prominent qualifications being a Fox News host. Dedicated Trump kisser. Ass kisser. And strong anti-DEI in the military. Or the perception of DEI. Because it's not actual DEI, but the perception of DEI. Which again is ironic. But what the hell is going on out here indeed? This is the government we have for the next 46 months. Give or take. And we're not even going to talk about the fact that there are those in his camp officially in government or not in government, who have already publicly talked about being in the works, plans to somehow have Trump elected to a third term. That's, not even gloss over the fact that it's unconstitutional, but openly talking about it now because there are people out there who are so sheepishly following and supporting this man that Constitution is just a piece of paper. Because he wants to do it, we want to do it. And that's a dangerous thing. Very dangerous. And at some point, there's a segment of this country. Don't just pause for a second. A third of this country didn't vote at all. A third voted for essentially Trump. A third voted for essentially Kamala. A third didn't vote at all. And that's the biggest problem in this country. There are people who sit back and don't vote for whatever reason, either disenfranchised or they feel it's not worth it, or I don't like either of these candidates, so I'm not voting for either one. Whatever the reason. Or they simply can't physically go vote. Maybe they're hospitalized, maybe whatever. But that's the problem. We got to get people off the bench who, for whatever reason, other than physically being unable to vote, sit out and say, I don't care. And now they have not buyer's remorse, window shopping remorse, right? And we know there are people who have buyer's remorse. We've seen tons and tons of videos of people who vote for Trump and now they don't have a job or whatever the reason, they now have buyer's remorse. But the empathy for those people is not very high. You look at social media, you look at your circles of people, there's not a lot of empathy for people who voted for Trump and now are facing repercussions negatively for that vote. But now they're openly saying, we're going to buck the Constitution and get him a third term. And hey, why not? Why not go the Putin route? Just fourth, fifth, sixth until he dies, and then the next Trump, right? Just keep the oligarchy going, right? Authoritarianism. Just let's just go forth with it. Forget our democracy. Forget the republic. Unless you and I have something to say about it. But what the hell is going on out here indeed? For another 46, give or take, months. Before I get into the last thing in my head, Dave's Head Podcast is now part of the Alive Podcast Network, home of Black Voices, where community, culture, and creatives live. Dave's Head Podcast adds to the catalog of over 70 titles available in the Alive Podcast Network and app for both iOS and Android. Check out Dave's Head Podcast and many others in the Alive Podcast app, the home of Black Voices. The last thing that's in my head is service. And speaking of service, the military isn't the only way you can serve your community or your country. To those who will, do, and have served, thank you for your service, a tremendous responsibility, and a tremendous gift to give this nation. Serving your community is a way to have a powerful and lasting impact on people that you interact with every single day. Now, I've talked about organizations I'm a part of and do some good work with those organizations many times during the week, the weekend, long trips, etc. This past weekend, I had the pleasure of attending 5 events in 4 days. Say that again, 5 events in 4 days. And this is from Thursday to Sunday. Thursday, I attended the opera event where local performers in both opera and arts performed in a fundraising campaign for the NPHC of Delaware, or of Newcastle County, Delaware, I should say. Friday, a celebratory happy hour with my chapter as we celebrated our 25th chapter anniversary. Saturday, attended not one but 2 galas, both celebrating 25 years for 2 different chapters. One for my TO's chapter, one for my chapter. And then Sunday, the 5th event in 4 days, was a high tea which recognized scholarship awardees and the chapter, Epsilon Rosetta chapter of Newcastle County, their Zeta of the Year. But it also provided a bit of a surprise. they chose at the end of that high tea event to honor me with an honorable service award, which was incredibly surprising. And during the introduction, they talked about my support, as I've spoken about before. I've risen through the levels of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, first on a chapter level, then the state level, now on a regional level, and we'll see where it goes from there. But they talked about on each level, I had continuously supported them in their endeavors, and the women who are affectionately called sorors or sisters to my fraternity. And so it was an incredible honor. If you follow me on socials, you see there was a video that was posted. And normally I have no issue speaking. Clearly I have a podcast, correct? But that particular day, I will honestly say I was caught off guard and surprised and just humbled in the moment. And so I did not have a long acceptance speech. It was pretty short, actually, for me, extremely short for me, but also conveyed the thank you that I wanted to convey. From a young man, my grandmother lit a fire inside of me of service. It's driven me to be of service in many, many ways over the years, from mentoring youth to mentoring young adults to giving speeches, to the work that I do with the multiple organizations I'm either part of or lead, or a combination of the two. I'm a strong believer that what you pour into youth and ultimately your community will enrich that community and those youth in multiples that you may or may not see. You know, the message you provide someone today, or the help or assistance you provide someone today, you don't know how that translates forward into their life. And so I carry that fire with me, and that desire to pay it forward or reach back, and all the different ways you can put it. Because I believe that, you know, each one teach one, and that who you help today, they may help somebody tomorrow, but they may not have that desire to help if you don't help them. And so hopefully it's a positive virus through your community and through the world by just, you know, one act of service or help. The butterfly effect, right? One of my favorite concepts. A butterfly's wings on one side of the earth can impact something on the other side of the earth. Now, that can or cannot be true. Scientifically, I have not done the research on it, but the concept is one of my favorite concepts out there. My TO reminds me periodically that, and I'm going to try to quote this because I do listen. Not all the time, but I do listen. I think this is the exact quote. You can't be everywhere for everything, and you can't be everything to everybody. Something she says to me all the time when she tries to rein me in from saying yes to everything. A habit that I try to improve. Periodically, I try. I'm successful sometimes. But I've always had the drive to serve, and I've always had this saying that I carried with me from a very, very, very young age. If you can, do. Which, you know, obviously conflicts with you can't be everywhere for everything and everything to everybody. Because I always feel that if I can, I should. Because many people that I can name did something for me at some point in my life to aid me in getting to the place in life that I am. And so it's important to me to be of service, important to me to give my time, my talent, my treasure, all three, or some combination of those three, to be of assistance to those who may need it, whether they know it or not. And service is a good thing. Service removes us from the stresses of life a little bit at a time, whether it's the person giving the service or the person receiving the service. In that moment, stresses that you may have are reduced because you're giving a piece of yourself despite what's going on in your life, or you're receiving something from someone in a moment that you may need it, a moment that you may be stressed, and it relieves that just a little bit. That's a great, great thing. Service is a great, great thing. And that's what's in my head. So in a age where studies and reports increasingly highlight a troubling decline in Holocaust awareness and empathy, it's more important than ever to keep the stories of resilience and survival alive. Understanding the past is crucial to shaping a more compassionate future. In 2020, the Claims Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, released a U.S. Millennial Holocaust Knowledge and Awareness Survey, the first ever 50-state survey on Holocaust knowledge among millennials and Gen Z. I am not either one of those, by the way. You can find that on claimscon.org/millennial-study. They did it worldwide, but focusing on the U.S., here are some of the findings. When asked how many Jews were killed during the Holocaust, 63% of millennials and Gen Z did not know 6 million Jews were murdered. 36% of millennials and Gen Z thought that 2 million or fewer Jews were murdered. 11% of U.S. millennial and Gen Z respondents believe Jews caused the Holocaust, which is crazy. Now, some social media questions were asked, and approximately 49%, which I actually thought was low compared to, when you think about the way social media just spreads everything like wildfire today. But about 49% of U.S. millennials and Gen Z have seen Holocaust denial or distortion posts on social media or elsewhere online. Again, basically 1 in 2, which I would assume that'd be way higher compared to the number that was reported. A couple positives, though. 64% of all U.S. millennials and Gen Z believe the Holocaust education should be compulsory in schools. And 80% of all respondents believe that it's important to continue teaching about Holocaust, in part so that it does not happen again. Now, we're talking about this, and normally I spend a little longer on my monologues and intros before I get to my guest, but I really want to get to this guest, and I really want to hear the story and have the story be told. So we're jumping quicker into the guest segment than we normally do. I'm not going to give any commentary on the Holocaust. We all know the horrific stories, or we should know, or apparently a lot of people don't know. So I want to get to my guest as quickly as possible. Robert Wolfe, MD. A little bit about him. He's a multiple award-winning author and neuroradiologist. We're going to talk about that too. He's an extraordinary guest whose journey is as inspiring as it is heartwarming. He grew up as the only child of Irvin and Judith Wolfe, two courageous souls who defied the odds by escaping communist Hungary, and his father's tragic history of escaping the Nazis not once but twice and having his own parents deported to Auschwitz. This inspired Robert to document his parents' tales and share those stories with Jewish groups and others throughout the United States. In his book, which we're going to talk about, Not a Real Enemy, Robert shares his family saga and the forgotten history of the nearly 500,000 Hungarian Jews who were deported and killed during the Holocaust through an epic and inspiring tale of daring escapes, terrifying oppression, tragedy, and triumph. So, Robert, welcome to Dave's Head. How's it going?
I'm well. Thank you for having me. I much appreciate it. Very, very nice introduction.
Thank you for that. I am, like I said, I normally take a little longer with my intros, give my own opinion and thoughts on things. I feel it's very non-important today with this conversation because I'm very interested in getting to your story, your background, especially your book, your parents, all these things. But before we get to that, I know I gave a little brief intro, but I do like to take time before we get into it to have my guests tell the audience who they are in their own words. So if you could take a minute, tell the audience who you are, what you do, and what you're about.
I'd like to do that, but I first want a quick comment on what you just said because I'll forget otherwise later. When you say, 6 million, 2 million, to me, one death is too much, whether it's Gaza or back in World War II. And I appreciate those statistics you threw out there. There's some encouragement there because ultimately I do want the book to be taught in the classroom, and we could talk a little bit more about that later as well. Ultimately, 50 million people died in World War II, and not a lot of people know that. And not just Jewish, homosexual, disabled, the very old, the very young people, unlike my dad, who was useful because he was a young man, so he was assigned to forced labor camps, as were so many others. Only 5% of those people survived, and most of them ended up in prisoner of war camps. Even though they were unarmed, they were treated as prisoners of war. So that's a little side thing. That's just under Nazi Hungary and soon after, because they didn't know what to do with the Jewish people at the time. Farms and factories, and the men that were in the forced labor camp, the camps that actually survived, were still in the camps, were put into POW camps, and my dad was still on the run and hiding, so he fortunately didn't have that, but he had been through enough as it was. So lucky me, my dad, here's the punchline, Dad ended up becoming an OBGYN in the Detroit area and delivered 10,000 babies in his career, in his lifetime. Jovial and jolly, no signs of PTSD, with everything he went through, you would never know. You never know what it was unless you actually read the story. So kudos to my parents. If you don't have good family, you have nothing. I'm lucky to be here because of my parents. I'm lucky to be well educated because of my mom and dad. And I guess this is one way to repay them, is with my legacy and putting this book back into out there so that people know what's going on in the world, the dark world especially, and the parallels of today. That said, I was raised in suburban Detroit. I was one of 3 Jewish people in my high school. My high school was about 40% African American, and never felt anti-Semitism there. There was bullying, of course, and there was trash talk on the field, and picking on little kids because they were little or a wrong place at the wrong time. We all dealt with that, but we left it on the field. There was no. I never had a sense of racism or anti-Semitism. Growing up in the 60s and 70s, unfortunately, in the Detroit area and elsewhere, the African Americans are still struggling to get votes, to find freedom and equality as well. So a lot of parallel stories that too. I always think of the movie Mississippi Burning in 1964 and how horrible a movie. It's a great movie, but how horrible those stories were. So that's and on and on and on. And then we go back 300, 400 years, and we go back to Exodus in the Old Testament and talk about all that as well. But so I was lucky enough to go to Tufts University and graduated biology psychology major. Went to University of Michigan Medical School. Again, very fortunate. Then I did an internship at Boston University, Framingham Hospital it was called at the time, and then I did my radiology residency at Brown and my neuroradiology fellowship at Yale. So now I'm about 30 years old. My indentured servantry time is finally over, and I just finally started to make a living. I've been in the radiology field for 35 years. I just retired from it. I've been part-time actually for the last 19 years, so I'm fortunate enough to be able to do that and have some flexibility to occasionally get on the golf course or go out for lunch or do projects like this. So I've got a lot of interests: sports, music. I'm a foodie. I believe in fitness and nutrition, golf, travel, education, and of course history. And this is my charge now. This is what I'm doing. And we can talk about the history of the book if you'd like, and why I was motivated to end up doing this. But lucky me. I'm a lucky American. I'm happy to be in a free country and very privileged to get that kind of education, and especially to even just be around. Like my mom and dad, in some cases, split-second timing helped them to survive, and so here we are.
Gotcha. And talking about the sports for a second, so I like to golf as well. I'm actually golfing this next time, probably this Sunday. But we talked about a little bit before we started recording the Detroit Lions and Eagles fans that we are, and we won the Super Bowl. But I look at Detroit as a team that's going to be up there competing with us for the next couple of years. So maybe we'll develop a little rivalry. You never know.
I would hope so. I mean, it was so close. The defense was decimated. But speaking of, I've been a fan since 4 years old, University of Michigan too. So lucky me, I ended up going to Michigan for medical, and I've been a fan since 4. And my mom and dad, they had friends that had season tickets. And of course, a lot of people had Lions season tickets, and later on I did. And my parents had a friend, Magda, who was also Hungarian, and she was a secretary for the Lions back in the day. So I had a Bill Munson helmet, which I still have. I had a Greg Landry jersey and signed football with the whole team signature, including Mel Farr, if you remember him. Unfortunately, I lost that football, but it was just great being a kid growing up and watching them in Tiger Stadium, and the other sports too, the Pistons, Red Wings, Tigers. Yeah. And my dad was not big into sports. He would take me just because he knew how much I loved it. So kudos on that too. He loved people. He loved the field goal kickers, soccer lover and all that, and he liked to people watch. But it brings back good memories, that kind of activity that my dad would spend his days taking me to a game that he didn't really understand or care about that much. So it means a lot.
Yeah, and actually, I know you touched on your dad already. I did want to start with talking about a little bit of positive about your parents, and not necessarily the inspiration for the book, but their life outside of, the negative and horrible experiences they had. And so I know you touched on your dad a little bit outside of those situations, but talk about both parents, if you will, and who they were.
Okay, it's great. That's a great point. My dad had a great upbringing as a kid. He was a spoiled kid, and we clearly talk about that in the book, and then suddenly put into forced labor camp. they really struggled the first 20, 30 years of their lives on and off because of all the nature of the anti-Semitism and the persecution. So I'm not a big into entitlement, but if anybody deserved to have a better life, the second half of their life would be my mom and dad. It was harrowing even after they left Europe. They made it and met my mom's father in New York. Pretty easy throughput to get to Providence, Rhode Island. Dad did his OBGYN residency, which was a struggle. Mom was a med student when they left Hungary, and she had to work in a lab doing research while my dad had to redo his OBGYN residencies because somebody had to pay the bills, the rent. And Boston, as you know, is not a cheap city, and I imagine it wasn't in the 50s and 60s. Finally, he finished that, and they came to Detroit where the jobs were, and life really got better for them at first. Actually, his first job was in Detroit proper, but by 1965 they could foresee the urban blight that was coming on, the trouble, the crime, and my dad happened to get a good job offer out in suburbia, so he took that. But and I'm sure that must have scared the heck out of them because of everything else they went through. Or on the other hand, maybe they just weren't afraid of anything because of all they'd been through. So hard to know. I can't get into their heads now because they both passed, unfortunately. But they were Holocaust educators. My dad loved his work. He would have worked till the day he died. And Mom was busy. She was one of the leaders in ORT, which is a Jewish organization. They were busy they were well received in the Jewish community, the medical community, and let's call it the Eastern European American community. They were the type of people, and I'm trying to draw off that same page that instead of shunning each other and abandoning each other, they like to embrace and engage with other people and find out about their backgrounds, where they're from, the politics were in their countries if they were from a foreign country, and they love to educate not only about the Holocaust but also history, and they were very well-rounded people. I'm well-rounded, I guess, in a different way. I'm more like jazz and rock and fusion, but they were classical and jazz. It didn't matter as long as you had musical appreciation. They loved the opera, they loved museums, they loved to travel, they were big into education, theater, music, you name it. So they were open, and they were foodies too, by the way. I guess that's where I got it from. I don't know too many Hungarians that aren't foodies, but I don't want to stereotype. But fun-loving people, very serious people though, disciplined, and they disciplined me too. So I'm very, very lucky.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of start with that just because I know the story we're going to talk about and the history we're going to talk about, but I wanted to get that positivity and the other side of that out there before we started. Looking at the survey statistics I talked about before I introduced you, and you touched on that briefly before you introduced yourself, is there anything about those statistics that were a surprise or stood out, or did they kind of just go par for the course with how things are?
You surprised me with some of them. I mean, I'm glad people think that that the history needs to be retaught and redone. I think the history of 9/11 still needs to be done because some of these younger kids are denying 9/11, and I need to remind them that 9/11 was an attack on America, and lots of people died, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Asian, and so people tend to forget about that kind of. So denying the Holocaust, even more so. A lot of people don't know about Hungary. Not a lot of people know about the Hungarian Revolution even, or communist Hungary, and we can go back even further. Nobody even talks about the Civil War now, or World War One, the War of 1812. In fact, I'm no professional historian. I know my little segment of history, but not to that degree. It is what it is. I'm here just try recant their stories as they set them up in the 70s. And there's no sugarcoating in my stories. The truth, there's happy stories, there's sad stories, and it's unnecessary. I think hatred. I guess I just did it because my parents knew I was going to do it, and redo their book. And don't you hate it when your parents are right? And I also had the message in the background about anti-Semitism and hate, and the message is clear from the beginning, and so I just ran with it.
So yeah, we're in a bit of a polarizing time, especially the last, say, 15, 20 years or so in the U.S. And I'm not equating anti-Semitism with racism, although I think hate is hate. But what do you see as the biggest fuel source? I'm just using a reference, fuel source that keeps those two things alive, anti-Semitism and racism.
Well, it's the events like 9/11 or the coronavirus pandemic, where there was the hate of Asians indiscriminately and Islamophobia after 9/11, and people were not educated. And now with the October 7th attacks, so obviously these are ignited covert anti-Semitism or racism or hatred. But when I started this project, people were admonishing me that if I was going to query publishers, that I needed to separate out anti-Semitism and racism. But to me, nope. I think it's what's the line in Driving Miss Daisy? What does he say? It's always going to be the same people, you know. So it's a different group of people, but it's the same people. People that are raised with hate. I can't understand it. As a radiologist, I'm dedicated to the preservation, conservation of life, the beauty of the cell, the beauty of the anatomy, not just humans, but cats, dogs, giraffes, you name it. Just the beauty of life. And people like the Nazis and the communists and Hamas and these terrorist organizations, they don't think twice about cutting somebody's head off or shooting them. There's no appreciation for life, even within their own people. And that's a sadness that I can never understand. And that's part of the reason I'm trying to educate as well. And especially the younger people, kids, the classroom, families, and because education still starts at home. You're only a certain amount of time in school, but negative education starts at home too. So if we can combat that, then hopefully that slows down the hate. I don't know. I mean, for me, hate is a wasted emotion, kind of like jealousy, or it's just it causes war, and war is a waste. We've still got Ukraine going on, and really they haven't cleaned up Gaza, which is a mess. We're talking 20, 30 years of reparations, if that. And you can't repair PTSD or murder or torture. You just can't. So that's hard. All we can do is try to move on, and I think that there are at least some Arabic countries that are trying to embrace and engage with Israel more so. We'll say maybe Syria. I mean, it hasn't happened yet, but I think the Syrian people, like the Hungarian people back in the Hungarian Revolution of '56, want change, and sometimes there's a lot of sacrifice to it. But I'm doing it. Thank God I'm not in a war, but I'm doing it in describing what other people had to go through, and how it's the same 60, 80, 100 years later. And the other sad thing is how people find new ways to torture each other, to humiliate each other, murder, maim, persecute, whatever word you want to use. Different methods, but still it's the same process, and very, very sad.
Yeah, and you touched on the Gaza war, and just curious because it just popped in my head. Do you see a resolution? Do you see in our lifetime? I mean, like you said, this has been decades and decades and decades. Do you see a resolution, I should caveat that, peaceful resolution of coexistence and all the different things that we've talked about trying to get to equating to a resolution? Do you see that happening in our lifetime?
Not in the short term. I mean, obviously, military is necessary. I was thinking more about the health issues and the supply issues and the rebuilding and all that. Gaza is an independent state. I don't know. I'm not a politician. It's very difficult. There's still haters out there, Jewish haters and Israeli haters. Some of that's never going to go away. So you're always going to get your criminals and your terrorists. I certainly hope so. I think that if, I don't know, it's a good time to not be a politician, let's just say that, because to manage all of that, it would be like managing Hungary after World War II and the Hungarian Revolution, both a real mess. Maybe not to the same scale, but still a mess relative to the people that have to live there. So my hopes are that is the case. The whole leadership's going to have to change because there was just too much hate there. And I've seen enough videos and photographs of kids showing hate and following what they learn, and that's going to be really, really hard to undo. It's a very depressing thing, but we can try slowly but surely. Not everybody's like that, and 99% of people are not like that. That's the good news. Like it's always the one guy that ruins it for everybody. Osama bin Laden and Pol Pot and Hitler and Saddam Hussein. It's always the one guy that ruins it for everybody. But if the people start to call out the leaders and show some accountability, that's a good start. And we argued that back in 2001 after 9/11 that the Islamic people and I have a lot of Islamic friends, by the way. Most would be more peaceful, more about their religion and families. Whereas if we got that select 1% or so that, or less, I would imagine, that are just they're belligerent, they're violent, militant, and I don't know. we got to recruit the people that are good, not to gang up, but to re-educate the people that hate and learn to live with what you have.
Yeah, I know, and I know you said 99%. One of the things that I think people struggle with, a lot of people in this country struggle with, is it feels like it's a little less than 99%. It feels like that 1% just keeps growing and growing and growing. And maybe it's a lack of education. Maybe it's like you said, hate teaches hate, raises hate, keeps propagating hate. But that, like I said, that 1% feels like it's a lot worse. Is that just where we are right now? We're blasted with the news on TV, social media. We get information just thrown at us from all these other sources. So it seems like it's in our face more, or is it really just 1% and they just have a powerful influence on what we see?
I think it's a combination of both. There's a certain charisma that and that these negative energy people have for whatever reason. I agree that, and I've heard this multiple times, that especially people like in Israel, that because I was in Israel the year before the attacks, and I never felt safer. There was military everywhere, young kids because they had to serve. Um, no, I think, and yeah, it definitely gets exaggerated in social media and the regular media, and that's unfortunate. But we can use that. We can use those tools for good, for the fight for the good. So I've been reaching out to people like Bob Kraft, who's that fight, stand up against hate. Those commercials he's been doing with Tom Brady, fantastic commercials. Not that I would love to collaborate with them, even do a book talk up there, but they sent me a nice letter. They kept the book and sent me a nice note saying thank you, but we can't really help you right now. And I've pitched out to Steven Spielberg, and I hate the word pitched, queried, but I got a nice letter back from him or his attorneys, and they said, well, he doesn't really do this anymore for fear of lawsuits. As you know, Schindler's List was and the Shoah movie. My mom was in the Shoah movie too. So yeah, and it's hard to know. Back in the day, like if you're trapped in a country like Hungary and you have no say because you're surrounded by Hungarian police and Hungarian military who have no choice because they've got the Nazis and they're not going to beat the Nazis. So a lot of it is taking orders, and unfortunately that hatred spreads. It's word of mouth or newspapers back then, and now it's social media. So which can it can go viral anytime. So, and by the way, when people were killed in Hungary, like at the Danube. Not a lot of people. Well, a lot of people actually know about the Danube, probably more in Hungarian World War II history than anything else. 21,000 people died in 2 days, shot in cold blood without their clothes on, and hence the shoes. The display of the shoes in memorandum. But back then, my father describes that the Hungarian police and the Hungarian military were worse to the Jews than the Nazis themselves. So. Really sad to see, and it's different than this country, where I think there's still hope here, and in other democratic countries, is the guns aren't pointed at me and you. They're here to protect us, and I thank military people and police and security guards and ambulance drivers, EMT. Anytime I see somebody that I think is really helping society and giving of themselves with a lot of risk, and that's different where. You're just pointing guns at innocent people that can't defend themselves. A completely different thing. So,
yeah. So, just a curious question, and just want to see where this goes. And it just popped in my head when I was coming up with how to drive this conversation. What does it mean to be a Holocaust survivor or a descendant of one today? What does it mean? What is that existence like?
Well, being a descendant, there are very few Holocaust survivors left in this country. I don't know the exact number, but I hear it from time to time. But we're in the hundreds to thousands, which is very few. So, for me, it's important just to keep the message going. My parents wrote the stories in 1970s as though they happened the previous day. The smells, the sounds, the way the table was set, the conversations, the fear. And fast forward, I mean, they did the autobiography and wrote all the stories, paper and pencil, to typewriter, to computer, to disc. Dad passes away in '97, unfortunately. Mom in 2016, and here we are. I just turned the stories into something that couldn't stay on a computer, that couldn't stay on a disc or on a computer. It had to be shared with the world, and here we are. But the sad thing again, how there are different ways people maim and torture and persecute each other in different ways, or find new ways to do that. And It's so parallel. I mean, and my parents wrote this as though they knew this would happen even today. So when I picked up on the project, when I first started, it was nothing like it is now, but it couldn't be more relevant now. So this is my charge. This is all I do. I hope I answered your question appropriately, because you can always reword it if I tend to ramble sometimes, or sometimes new thought, like you said, a new thought comes into your head, so I'll go with that too. So I diverge sometimes, but thank you for asking all these questions, because they're really relevant.
No, absolutely. And this is Dave's Head podcast, and the concept behind it is stuff that's in my head, so it's perfectly fine to ramble. That's totally okay. What's the most important message about the Holocaust that you think is being missed?
Well, how it's parallel today. I mean, this isn't exactly 1933, but like you said, the rise of fascism and anti-Semitism, and that's another thing, that when Hamas cheers on the Nazis, they don't understand. They were next. I mean, the Hungarians first. They were so systematic. If you weren't in the Aryan race, they were next. The gays, the LGBTQ, and that's a sad thing too. When I hear especially famous African Americans or LGBTQ people that get on board with this anti-Semitism thing, that to me that's a double indemnity. I don't. And I guess that's a parallel, because innocent Christian people. Even though I believe these people were atheists, the leaders, definitely the communists, the Nazis, I assume too, it was all about one guy, but they turned out to be apathetic, and I've got photographs of, like on Kristallnacht, of people smiling, walking by destroyed businesses and things, and it's that apathy that really is, and it's disappointing now, and not only with Christians and other people, but Jewish people too. So it's a difficult process. It doesn't seem to affect us unless we had, like if we had armored trucks and tanks with Hamas flags rolling down the streets here in the Miami area or Philadelphia, New York. Then we'd be thinking a lot more about it. Now, since we don't have that, and it unfortunately doesn't affect most people now, but still, the universities are still a problem, and I'm glad to see the government finally defunding them. If I had a kid there, I'd pull them out and I would sue. I mean, how many kids are lucky enough to go to a Ivy League school like Columbia, and this is what they're doing? So, and if my kid couldn't go to class, or if I'm a professor, well, if I were a professor there, I'd barge through these guys. I'd get back in the weight room, stay with it, and say, "Get the hell out of my way! I'm teaching my class, and if you want to fight me about it, I'll fight you." But I'm not big into violence, but we do have the right to defend ourselves, and you'll hear that from every Israeli too. So. In the Holocaust, though, people couldn't defend themselves. There was no, like we said, there was no social media, no photographs, no lawyers to help you. The truth of the matter was the witness was the next victim. Any witness that would have happened to you, like for example the Danube, but other mass killings, Auschwitz, early parts of the war, the Ukraine, Russia, Vilna, Poland. So no witnesses to. And photographs too. I mean, my dad was in forced labor camp. Very few photographs that I can find, but quite a few from the Holocaust and the Hungarian Revolution. So some of that was well preserved. And if people deny the Holocaust, the Nazis took tons of photos, and they used to send them back to their families to tell them what they were doing. And a lot of those got recovered, and a lot of them are very, very disturbing photos. Even to me, I've been doing this for 6 years. And by the way, before this 6-year thing, before I found the story, you never would have guessed that I would do this. Like I was apathetic, I guess, myself to the whole thing, until and both my parents were gone, and maybe it was a little too late, but it's never too late to do the right thing. And my mom, with her Hungarian accent, would say to me with a Jewish guilt, "You couldn't do this while you are still alive." So that's what she would say. But hopefully, from heaven, they're sitting in a nice. Patio. They're sitting on a patio with a sombrero or an umbrella, and sipping on a Mai Tai or something. I don't know. I mean, who knows what heaven's like. But hopefully, there's a pride there and a joy in them, in their spirits, that I did this. Because, like I said, I got Holocaust burnout as much as I got radiology burnout. So, but here we are, going strong. And the more difficult it is, the more my resolve.
Yeah, and you talk about burnout, and you mentioned the word apathy, and I was going to bring up apathy towards we have the First Amendment in the United States, which allows for freedom of speech, the ability to peacefully assemble. But there are groups in this country who exercise that right, who are hate groups, Nazi supporters, white supremacists. They, march and do different things. How does the community of Holocaust survivors or their families, how do they deal with the ability that they have to say and do and spread hate and all these things legally? How do you handle that?
It's scary. I mean, I'm out there with my story and everything. So, every time I go do a presentation at a synagogue or a JCC or a Holocaust museum, I'm, looking over my shoulder. And but it is what it is. It's got to be frightening for those that actually survived. I would lay low. I mean, but I think we should get better support from the law enforcement system. I think that more of these people should be educated with stories like my dad's, especially those that commit hate crimes and are arrested for it. Those people should be forced to read 10, 15, 20 books like mine, or movies, or both, and be re-educated. It may or may not work, but it's disturbing. And even in my home state of Michigan, I've heard these stories of they were doing the Anne Frank's diary. They were doing a play, and then when they got out, they were surrounded by the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists, and that would be scary. But they haven't burnt them down yet. But there's been attacks on synagogues, and people have died. There have been random murders, including in Detroit and Los Angeles. And I'm not sure who the perpetrator is, but it's scary. And hopefully, people that are nervous about it step up to their congressmen and their politicians and say, look, this is my next door neighbor, and the guy could kill me anytime. He could firebomb my house or hurt my children or kill my dog or whatever. I don't want to give these guys more ideas. People have enough ideas of how to torture each other, but it's got to be a scary thing. And it's hard to understand. And this is my way of doing it, is just trying to educate people on the peril of hate.
Yeah, this may sound a lot worse than I intended to sound. It's just me being really honest. In many regards, I've given up on people who have hate in their heart. Whether you're a racist, anti-Semite, whether you're, at any group, LGBTQ plus, whatever. People who hate people just for essentially existing. And not to say I want to get past that, but my feeling is at some point they'll die off. And hopefully enough people who hate other people, enough of them will die off where there just won't be enough of those people existing anymore. Not really asking if that's right or wrong. We're all entitled to believe and think what we want to believe. But what are your thoughts on that? Is it really just trying to ignore them?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm what's the word? I'm biased in who I query about my book. Like for book talks, I'm not going to start with mosques. Obviously, I'm going to start with synagogues and JC's Jewish community centers and stuff. I've done churches and town halls and all that. And it'd be great when somebody shows up and they say, "Boy, does that change? That changes my." Or they read the book and they say, "Boy, that changes my eye. That changes the way I think." Then I'm doing my thing. Some people will never get to change, but if we recruit, like I said, we recruit enough people to keep it in a very close circle, then that's going to help, because that stuff could die down. And I agree with you about bias. I mean, I look at somebody with a hijab at the TSA check in New York City, and there are quite a few, and I'm like, wow. And it's just this instant, it's this reaction you get that we just can't help. If you see somebody that's different than you, somebody limping, somebody in a wheelchair, somebody blind, but you see something that's a little off, we always have this instant, take it back. And same in radiology, same doing upper GIs and other procedures over the years. You have this predisposed, it's not a prejudice, but this predisposed idea of what you may or may not find in a patient, depending on their age, their sex, etc. So I'm trying to get rid of that bias by sharing. But I'm not going to be pitching China and Iran and North Korea or anytime soon. As you know, it's they're just not good target audiences. But in the free world where we live, where it's practical, I'm going to stick with that. So
makes sense. So let's talk about your book, Not a Real Enemy. We understand why you wrote it, but talk about that and summarize that again. But really, what do you want people to get from it the most important thing you want them to get from it, and even to spread the message about it? What would you like for that to be?
Well, everything we just talked about for the last 20 minutes, 25, that is number one. But also how my dad was a man of integrity, determination, resilience. He constantly had hope. Even though he wasn't religious, he was always sort of praying to God. And his 20 miracles that happened to him, 20 miracles in this book, and 4 escapes, like you said. And it's just amazing how he went through all that. And tough times, good times, bad times. You know, you're one day is a good one, and you're hiding, and you're happy, and the next day you're on the run again. So, very, very, very harrowing stories. But the way my dad got through it, so resilience, integrity, and ultimately redemption by becoming contributing citizens to society, delivering babies, educating people, and being able to raise a family peacefully. So. Whatever happened to my dad could happen to any one of us. I say that all the time. It could be a bad neighbor, a bad business deal, bad local government, federal government, foreign government, or even a natural disaster. You could find yourself without a home, without food, on the run, not knowing where you're sleeping next, and that's what happened to my dad all the time. The other issue is the light at the end of the tunnel. We talk about the light at the end of the tunnel. So dad escapes. He's out in the middle of nowhere in the mountains, and where are you going? You know, you're lucky if the bears or wolves don't eat you. You're lucky if the guards don't catch you and beat you or kill you. But where are you going? So I can't imagine how scary that is. So loneliness is another issue we talk about, and of course hope, and ultimately freedom. So the other thing is if everybody's got a story in them. So if you have a story, put it on paper. And next thing you know, you'll have 100 pages, 150 pages, and you might have a book in you too. So I'm not saying you have to be traditionally published, but it's nice to share your stories. And even if it's not for the general public, maybe your family, your kids. Another thing I like to talk about, and not so much with my dad because he loved his work, but when it comes to burnout or satiety, change vectors. If you're tired of what you're doing, go part-time, pivot. Like I said, write that book, write an opera, write a play, spend more time with your family, go volunteer somewhere. Don't go protesting at colleges and universities asking for the death of nations and other people. It's just people don't care, and it's not fruitful, and it's just gonna cause more death, more arrests, more death, and costly. And hopefully it burns itself out. But you're right. It's never been completely zero, and we get these catalysts that you talked about earlier that unfortunately ignited. But October 7th was quite a while ago, but it still seems like yesterday. In the Ukraine war, even. What is it, 3 years now? I forget exactly, but it's ridiculous. I called the Hungarian Revolution, or the Ukraine war, the Hungarian Revolution on steroids, because at the beginning of the war it was compared to that because of the seeming apathy. And I can't say it's apathy. It's the United States has a responsibility to protect its own citizens. So to just delve into war, same thing happened in World War II. It took a while before the U.S. got recruited into World War II. A, it didn't affect them, and of course, there's Pearl Harbor. That was a big one, but B, they finally did the right thing. But C, you have to protect your own citizens. You send men over to Europe or whatever, people are going to die. By the way, 500,000 Jewish men and women fought for the United States in World War II. So, including my mom's late boyfriend, who they dated a few years after my dad passed. So it was a super, super nice guy. But he came from Hungary to the U.S. before the war, went back and survived, along with another 500,000 people. 500,000 Hungarians died, like you said, and that's like, again, I'm going back to one is too many. I mean, we talk about these numbers, but just one is too many. One belongs to a family, and then you're multiplying it by seemingly infinite numbers. It's unfathomable.
That's the end of my Q&A segment. Now we're going to move to the segment with my guests I like to call First Thoughts. But First Thoughts is brought to you by Live Podcast Network, which Dave's Head Podcast is now a part of. Home of Black Voices, where community, culture, and creatives live. Dave's Head Podcast adds to the catalog of over 70 titles available in their Live Podcast Network on both iOS and Android. Check it out. So, First Thoughts, for those who are joining for the first time. I used to say a couple seasons ago, shame on you, but I'm happy you're here. The way First Thoughts works is I offer a word or a phrase to my guests to get their first thoughts. Obviously, they are not privy to this because that would ruin the whole First Thoughts narrative. So, Robert, are you ready for some first thoughts?
Yeah, I am. I can talk a little bit more about the book if you'd like. Just what's inside of it. It's a biography about my dad. It's an adventure. It's a history. It's the history of Hungary from the end of World War I to the end of the Hungarian Revolution in 1956, which a lot of people don't know about it. It covers Nazi Hungary. It covers Communist Hungary. It covers 2 wars. My dad was a 4-time escape artist, twice from forced labor camps under Nazi Hungary and twice under Communist Hungary. He even missed an escape. There's a teaser. Went to the wrong train station under Communist Hungary. Everybody who made the right train, the right station, got arrested, including his medical school classmate. And he thought he was the unluckiest guy in the world. But the luck on this guy, as they say, the luck of the Jewish, the luck of the Irish, whatever you want to call it. I think it's just the hand of God. So there's that. 20 miracles besides, including his escapes, let's say, but the way he got into medical school, the way he found out about his parents' unfortunate fate in Auschwitz months after the war was over, arguing with armed Russian soldiers on his 3rd escape and winning the argument. My dad was never armed throughout his life, throughout the book, throughout the story, and arguing with an armed Russian soldier about why he should let him go through the border because he was supposed to fix X-ray equipment of all things in an Austrian hospital, and he bluffed his way through it. It was unbelievable. So, what else is so the anti-Semitism is in the backdrop throughout the book. Even people that helped them escape, like the guards in Austria when they were finally in a free country. They had a couple of bottles of wine or rum that my parents brought to bribe them with to help them along. The renegade that helped them escape that 4th escape and the escape with my mom. In crappy, wintry, muddy weather with the Russian planes going over and the lights, and he was barking out anti-Semitic comments as well. Believe me, my mom and dad wanted to argue with him left and right after all they went through, but it wouldn't have been a wise time to do that. You just want to get the hell out of there. So, a barber, my dad's barber. Here's a story for you. But before my dad's first escape, he had a foot infection, so he was in the hospital. He had to walk all the way back. And this was another march that they had, and they thought it was a death march. They thought the war was almost over. They didn't know who was going to win, whether it was going to be Russia, or U.S., or Germany, Austria. They didn't know. So they couldn't even tell, even if planning an escape, whether they should stay in Mother Hungary or try to get into Austria. Austria could have been their demise if the war was lost. So he has a foot infection, and they had a 3-day window to decide to escape, and that's an amazing escape. That's the one thing I remember from the first time that I had read my dad's manuscript about 30 years ago. And then I forgot kind of the rest, or it didn't impress me until I reread it and redid it, 5, 6 years ago. But the doctor that treated him in the hospital, which was a crappy, non-sterile, disgusting hospital, said to my dad, "It doesn't matter if I treat your foot or not, you're going to be dead soon anyway." So imagine going to see your doctor and he tells you that. It's just, it's completely unethical. But like I said, there's no sugarcoating in this book. If Dad said that that's what happened, and that's what happened, they were good people, and like so many others who survived, wrote their stories and shared it. Unfortunately, a lot of people who survived didn't do that because they did have PTSD, or they just didn't want to recount it. And we heard that about Vietnam, of course, too, and World War II, I guess, in general, and probably Korea, although Korean vets now are probably getting up there in age as well. Some people that don't survive don't get to tell their stories, unfortunately, and that's another sad thing. That the 50 million people that died in World War II, most of them didn't have their story across unless they already shared it through letters or whatever. Anne Frank's diary is a good example of that with other people. So otherwise, not so much. So there was probably amazing, amazing survival stories. Even if people died, they might have escaped. They might have tripped on barbed wire, was electrocuted, eaten up by an animal in the woods. Who knows? Died of starvation. We never talk about starvation either. That's another thing. Starvation is a common. I know how my dad was. He loved to finish his plate and finish mine if I didn't. And this just came up the other day, and now I know why. Forced labor camp, without food, working 12, 14-hour days, bad combination. They didn't care if you lived or died. You were just slave labor, so.
Well, no, it sounds like it's a very historically informative book with some great stories, like you said, miracles mixed in. So definitely encourage my audience to check out the book. Where can they find the book?
Okay, may I show a picture of it?
Sure.
All right, real quick. I don't want to, because it's an important point. So it's won 4 awards, and I owe all that to a great team that I've had it's another important message that I would like to share is that it's all about the team. I mean, I'm here talking. If it weren't for the team, I wouldn't be here. And the 4 awards, I'm not one to pat myself on the back, but it is good to see that people in the know, people that are knowledgeable, think the book is good quality, and they understand the importance of the book. So that's the. But none of it means anything if it doesn't help me in the fight against anti-Semitism. So that said, if you Google my name, Robert J. Wolf, MD, if you Google the book, Not a Real Enemy, you'll find us. I'm on robertjwolfmd.com if you want to see some more videos about the Revolution and World War II. We got a lot of content in there. A great guy helping me with the website. The book is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Tufts, and 4 Holocaust museums, hopefully more in the future, but the U.S. Holocaust Museum in D.C., where I did 2-day book signings, which was a fantastic experience, and I would do that every day if I could. The Zeckelman Center in Michigan, the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center of Nassau County in Long Island, which I recently did a book talk there, and also the Illinois Holocaust Museum. So hopefully over time it'll be more. I'm in talks with Houston, I'm in talks with some colleges, universities. I've got my first university talk coming up, but that's where you can find the book. And I'm on socials across the board too. X, I'm going to try to be hip, and at 62 and a half, actually 62 and a half tomorrow, I'm going to try to be hip and call it X and Meta, because that's what they're called now. I mean, people still call it, they say Facebook author page, so I got all that, Robert J. Wolf, MD, yada yada. Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, which is my favorite. I think it's the most professional. It would probably be the last social media I would give up, because I think I get a lot of traction through that, and very serious people, and same like-minded, and but most people are like-minded, but LinkedIn is big for me. And also Instagram, and now recently TikTok and Blue Sky. I don't spend a lot of time with those, but I am posting, not daily, but about podcasts like this, and mostly stuff that's about the book. Unless it's a big sports event or a big concert I'm going to or something like that, then I'll take the day off from doing the work, which is and all I do with socials is work. I mean, that's I get to see very few posts from friends, or and I try to catch those, but it's your time spent is your time spent. So Not a Real Enemy by Robert J. Wolf, MD. All the socials, you'll find us. It's great meeting great people like you. Like, this journey is tough because I'm talking about hate and anti-Semitism every day, and you can tell by my personality that's not me. So I've got to fight that off. And this is after retiring, after 35 years as a radiologist, and not including med school, college. So that's 44 years. When I say 44 years, that's sweat. That's sweat. And it's not like that's, you poo-poo that away. So I don't have to be doing this. I'm just doing this on my own expense and time. I hope that someday the traction increases itself. More people read the book. We've queried producers now. Unfortunately, in the middle of the LA fires, so that's no pun intended, a retardant to what we're doing. But I'm also got to be sensitive to what's going on in the know. People are losing lives and homes, and so it's a difficult thing. But we have reached out to a few. I still have other ideas to reach out to, and I'm not done yet. Unfortunately, I don't have an assistant. I suppose I could hire an assistant at an hourly wage for a couple of days a week, which I probably should, so I can reach out to more museums and all that. It's a very difficult business. Writing a book, it's a fickle business. You don't just write it down and hand it to a publisher and sit around and collect royalties. It's anything but. The harder you work, hopefully the better you do, but that's not a guarantee either. So, like I said, thousands of dollars, thousands of hours, and I'm still trying to climb. And October 7th, my slippery slope went like this to this. So, on the one hand, there's more interest in it. On the other hand, there's also more hatred, and there's more of a battle with it too. So, what else was I going to say? 10% of my author proceeds are going to the U.S. Holocaust Museum in D.C. That's ongoing. That's in my trust. I have Christian stepdaughters and 3 Christian step grandkids. They're all wonderful. They support the book. 2 of them have been to the Holocaust Museum, showing me pictures of them holding the book, and then talking to the museum staff about me. And then a couple months later, I'm there signing books, which is I can't even describe that kind of experience. So I'm meeting great people like you. Getting hometown support is another great thing. I did an amazing book talk. It was the opening night when the Lions beat the Chiefs, so it was just an amazing day. And so we did that after the book presentation. sold out the place, sold out the books. We had backlog, and you hope that every discussion, every presentation would be like that, but it's not reality. So it's fickle, and you got to accept success with failure, like anything else, and you shouldn't give up. If you're an author, don't give up. Try it.
Yeah, it's a couple seasons actually. I've been talking about
That's a
writing
lot
a
of
book of my
thoughts.
own.
That's a lot of thoughts, right? I mean,
Oh yeah,
that
yeah,
was like 1 through 10.
yeah. No worries. It's actually been a couple seasons I've been talking about. I've had authors on before, and every episode where I have an author on, we talk about I got to write my book one day. I got to get to it at some point. But Robert, I do want to thank you for stepping into Dave's head. It was a great conversation. I think it's something, when you think about Holocaust, you think about all these stories that's going through history, the wrongdoings in history. There's movies that are done about them every once in a while. Every once in a while, somebody does like you said, a commercial or book or something like that. But the ability to keep these stories in the forefront of people's minds, so that one, they understand the true factual history about these events, and two, we don't repeat them. I think they're key. I think those are things that are important. So the work that you're doing, I commend that. Telling your parents' story, telling the true story about the Holocaust and all the wrongdoings that were done and continue to be done on this planet. So thank you for stepping into Dave's head. And like I've been saying with my guests all season long, may every today be the best day of your life.
Oh, that's a great thought. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
My favorite segment of my podcast is my GRIN, which stands for Great Reason to Be in Love with Now. This time of the year, a lot of things are changing. Time goes forward, allergies come back. Professionally, there may be some changes there as well. Hirings, firings, layoffs, retirement. Spring is always a great time to retire, by the way, because now you get the whole summer to just enjoy the first phase, the first steps of your retirement. If and when I retire, it's going to be sometime late spring. That way I can just go right into golfing and then laying out on a beach, enjoying the sun, more golf, barbecues, have fun. Anyway, personally though, it may be the first time experiencing warmer climates or warm weather without a loved one. And many other changes that may or may not be easily managed. Regardless of the change, from the smallest bedroom rearrangement to losing a job, you can manage and get through the change to the other side where a more comfortable existence awaits. Henry Ford Health posted an article back in 2017 titled 6 Strategies for Coping with Change by Kimberly Dawn Wisdom, MD, MS. And yes, Kimberly Dawn is all one word. Fun fact about her that I learned while prepping for this: in February 2012, Dr. Wisdom was appointed by then President Barack Obama to serve as a member of the advisory group on prevention, health promotion, and integrative and public health. Small world, go figure. And so in this article, she talks about change being inevitable, and even notes, quote, even positive changes, a promotion, birth, adoption, or a new home can cause turmoil. She adds, a new normal can be challenging. You may feel a mix of emotions ranging from joy to sadness and depression. With nearly every kind of change, stress is part of the equation. Trouble is, when you're stressed, the pillars of healthy living, i.e. eating well, exercise, sleep, social time, they tend to fall off your priority list. And so she lists 6 things that can get you through these times of stress, these times of change, whether it's stressful or not. And so I'll go through them really quickly. And I'll actually talk about some of them. They're very relatable to things going on in my life and other people's lives that I know of. So the first one, she says, is plan ahead. Now I'll talk about what she says, and I'll comment on it. She says, if you know change is on the horizon, do some prep work. Think about what you might do when an elderly parent falls ill. If your company has been through recent layoffs, consider how you'll navigate a job change. Change is stressful when you have a contingency plan. Change is less stressful when you have a contingency plan in place. Now, 2 situations she mentioned there are parents falling ill and recent layoffs, both of which I have experience with, in the sense that as my parents getting older, especially recent situations have kind of brought that to light. And doing the estate planning, doing the final preparations planning, things we don't like talking about, but we know that we rather not talk about them too late, or when we don't have the ability to talk to them or talk about them anymore with our parents. And so I 100% agree, planning ahead is the way to go there, in the sense that, it's a tough conversation to have. As parents get older, or parents are going through things that, are physically limiting their remaining life on this earth, we've got to start planning ahead. And that's a tough thing to do, tough thing to deal with, especially if you're someone like me who doesn't necessarily deal with death very well. And then on the other one, company layoffs or firings. I have personal experience with that as well, that I know people who have been recently laid off or going to be recently laid off. And that's an extremely stressful, especially in this climate right now, when you have a market flooded with people looking for work because of all the government layoffs that's happened, the changing in technology, and as things shift from what's marketable as a skill to less marketable as a skill, the constant rotation of those things, especially in technology. And so I get planning ahead when it comes to parents and end of life. Absolutely. It's a little more difficult with the employment side, especially if the layoffs are not necessarily well known, planned ahead for. Firings not known, you don't wake up to go, I'm going to get fired in the next week. So that's more so, to me, a keep your skills up to date, keep your resume up to date, keep your network, fresh, communicating with them. That way, when something does potentially happen, you can reach out and say, hey, I'm coming available, or I'm available now. Is there anything that you know about there? And the bigger your network, the more strong your network, the better you have a chance to just jump back on your feet. Maybe take a month off, depending on if you got a package, or a couple weeks off, and get right back out there if you so desire. But planning ahead is definitely key. Number 2, she says, reframe your thinking. Figure out what's going on in your mind when you're feeling sad and break negative patterns. Once you become aware of negative thoughts, you're better equipped to shift them to emphasize the positive. Now, obviously, this is a lot dealing with self-awareness. Not only knowing where you might be slipping into a depression state, or when you're kind of snowballing the negative thoughts that could lead to depression, or just lead to a state that's not good for the moment. And so it's taking that time to say, I'm in a negative space right now. Instead of saying, you know what, maybe I'm not worth it. Maybe that's why they got rid of me. Maybe you look at it as, you know what, this is an opportunity for me to pivot and shift, maybe go a different direction, or really get with a company that can see my worth. It's time for me to buck up and prove who I am to people who may not have seen it before. Or when it comes to, your parents, maybe I just need to stop focusing on what may be an end result that's coming, and embrace the time we have now, while still doing the planning for what's coming at some point in the future, and stop worrying about when that point is. Just plan today so that it's there waiting whenever that time comes. But enjoy the moment you have right now. Number 3, she says, take time to reflect. Most people don't take time to mark or mourn what they're losing before diving into something new. Rather than numb feelings of sadness with new distractions, give your thoughts a voice. And she talks about journaling, or sitting down with someone professionally or close to you and just talking about what you're going through, or reflect on the things that you're feeling. 100% agree. And I've talked throughout the seasons about the divorce that I went through very early on in the early seasons of this podcast. And one of the things, whether you, my audience, know that or not, having those conversations and revealing some of those things through this podcast was kind of like that reflection time that I had. Kind of like that conversation that I needed with, a close friend or even a therapist. But then there were also people in my inner circle who I had conversations with as well, that allowed me to have my venting moments, or my frustration moments, or my strategy and planning moments, or, whether I was outwardly or not seeking it, getting validation for who I am. And so taking that time to reflect and have conversations is definitely 100% key. going back to the two examples, talking about situations with elderly parents, talking about, pre or post, and it's kind of two different situations, right? Say you got laid off already, then talking about, how you feel about being laid off or fired or changing jobs, whatever the case may be, and feeling unappreciated, feeling those things. And if it's before, talking about your concerns about the state of the company or the state of the people you report to or whatever the situation may be, can open up the ideas to get you to plan ahead and also reframe your thinking. Number 4, she says, strive to maintain some normalcy, which I think is extremely hard in various situations. Structure and routine are comforting, 100%. So the more you can maintain your tried and true routine in the midst of a change, the better off you'll be. Just very simple. Think about the morning workouts that you do, or going to bed at a certain time, or hanging out, every Sunday with your girlfriends, or, brunch on Sundays, or happy hours on Fridays, or whatever it may be. Calling your parents every 2 days or every other day or every day. As much as you can maintain that sense of normalcy, the better you'll be mentally, and you'll also be comforted. And so, again, the two examples, aging parents, speaking to them every day or every other day or whatever the cadence is, or having dinner with them every Sunday, whatever that cadence is. And with the stresses outside of that, like, work pre and post layoff, it's getting up the next day and doing your workouts if that's what you used to do. It's, getting outside onto the warm deck or going for a walk in the sun. It's those small feelings of normalcy. It'll keep your head not only clear, but keep it positive so that you can do what you need to do to move forward. Number 5, create some comfort. Kind of goes along with normalcy. Incorporate stress relieving and enjoyable activities into your day. Listen to relaxing music, meditate, go to the gym, or take a warm bath or shower if you're me. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Now, this is a little bit different than just maintaining normalcy or reflecting. This is understanding I may need some help. I may need to do something to get me out of my stressful situation or my headspace. Again, meditating, music, just sitting there in music and not silence, but sitting there with no other stimuli or distractions and just listening to music. Now, every once in a while, I occasionally take a warm bath, but usually it's a shower. And so for me, it might be getting in the shower, a nice steamy, women, y'all do some weird things with temperatures and showers. Like, y'all don't love your skin, or your skin is extremely thick. We're not going to talk about this episode though. But taking a nice hot long shower. And for me, it might even be shaving, coming out just feeling clean and fresh and lined up and, all that stuff. That might be something that creates the comfort for me. Going golfing, right? Except if I'm having a bad day, then that kind of adds to stress, which kind of sucks, and that defeats the purpose. But maybe miniature golfing, who knows? But either way, don't forget, don't be afraid to ask for help, right? Maybe it's, hey, you want to go for a drive with me? Hey, hit up your homie. You want to go golfing? Or, just want to go to dinner. Want to go to happy hour. Whatever the case may be, asking for help. Or if it's seeking something professional, going to talk to somebody for an hour, a couple times a week or once a week, whatever. Create your comfort. Get reset if you need to by doing something. And lastly, number 6, count your blessings. Even during difficult times, things like noticing a starry sky or a beautiful sunset or watching a colorful butterfly can act almost like a reset button for your mind. And this is kind of what I was talking about in the prior one. Resetting your mind, taking a moment to say, you know what? I've got my health. I've got my air. I got my life. I've got my boyfriend. I got my girlfriend. I got my family. I have savings. I have skills. I have so many things to get me past the situation. I have tons and tons of memories. I have a plan in place for my parents. Whatever the situation is, that's something that you can lean on to reset your mind. Again, coping with change or managing change is not something that everyone is birthed with that skill set. It's something you can learn over time. It's something, honestly, it's one of those trial by fire things where, depending on how things go throughout your life, that skill gets honed and sharpened and all that stuff. Or it might be something you just got help with and you got better at it over time. Somebody like me, there's a lot of things that happened younger, as I was younger in life that really refined my ability, I believe, to cope and manage change and stress and negativity in life. But there may be people who are born with that ability as well. Iron sharpened iron for me. They just might have came out the womb sharp. But it's unique to every situation. And coping with change or managing change is something that you can take these 6 things, planning ahead, reframing your thinking, taking time to reflect, strive to maintain some normalcy, creating some comfort, and counting your blessings. Those 6 things can help you sharpen your skill with managing change. And the better you're able to manage change, the not necessarily faster, but more effectively, you can recover from it and progress positively in life. So check out the article, 6 Strategies for Coping with Change by Kimberly Dawn Wisdom, MD, MS, from Henry Ford Health. You can check out the article from back in 2017. I want to thank Robert Wolf, MD, the multiple award-winning author and neuroradiologist, for stepping into Dave's head. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to get onto the medical side of things with neuroradiology, and that whole practice is something, interesting, right? We may have him back to talk about all that stuff. You also may have noticed this might be the second time we didn't have a conventional first thoughts segment with our guests. A little bit of a miscommunication issue, but we got some great content and thoughts about it as well, and also some details about his book, which is great to have. Check out his website, robertjwolfmd.com. Check him out on LinkedIn, robert-j-wolf-md. On Instagram, Not a Real Enemy. On X, Robert J. Wolf MD, all one word. YouTube, at Robert J. Wolf MD, all one word. And again, the book is Not a Real Enemy. Story of his parents and survival and multiple miracles to get through just evil. I won't even give it much more life than that. Just get through evil and evil people. Lastly, as I started last season, I want to leave you a quote until next time. Nelson Mandela is a name that kind of sits out there like MJ, Michael, Tyson, just so many people Barack, you can just get Oprah, you can just give one names and you know who they are. And if you don't know, I urge you to look up the history of Nelson Mandela. But speaking about resilience and managing change and even service, but really just resilience and managing change. This quote just flashed and stayed bright for me for this episode. So the quote goes like this: "Do not judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again." As we just talked about, the ability to handle and manage the many ways that a curveball from life can be thrown at you is really key to building and maintaining success, positivity, and reducing stress in your life. You're going to get knocked down. Sometimes hard, sometimes soft, sometimes catastrophically. But the desire, the will, the preparation before it to get up, stand up, and just take the next step along your path is the key to really how you endure successfully anything and everything. So service, resilience, and managing change. All great reasons to be in love with now. That's all for this episode of Dave's Head. If you enjoyed this episode, I'm sure you'll love similar content in the Alive Podcast Network app. Plus, you can support this podcast and enjoy ad-free listening to nearly 100 other Black-hosted podcasts. Download the iOS or Android app, become a member, and experience unlimited access to Black-hosted content week after week. Follow, like, and or subscribe to this podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and or X at Dave's Head Pod, and on YouTube at Dave's Head Podcast. For more information and links to all things Dave's Head, check out our website at daveshead.card.co. Episodes premiere on the second and fourth Fridays of the month. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, enjoy life because life should be fun. Take care.